Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. This week's special guest is Nikki Parkinson, wife, mother of three, businesswoman and online community leader. Nikki is a former journalist turned blogger and author. Just 4 years ago, she added another string to her bow by becoming a fashion designer. And now at the age of 55, her business, Styling You the Label, has become something of a disruptor in the fashion world. Nikki has long advocated for a disruption in the way that fashion is marketed to women. Styling You the Label is the first label globally to invest in showcasing its designs on every size that it sells, size 6 through to 20. Not only does that increase customer confidence, but it flips that whole idea that fashion should only be seen on one size, height, age, colour, belief, or ability. At the core of every single thing that Nikki does is her drive and her ability to lift other women up, from the women in her online community to her customers and the women she employs. In our chat, we rewind the clock and go back in time to learn more about Nikki and how she's become the inspiring woman of today. All the links to Nikki and her fashion label can be found in the show notes. Welcome, Nikki, to the Redefining Midlife podcast. It is absolutely wonderful to have you on, and thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. Talking about the younger Nikki through to modern day Nikki and what Nikki in the future is going to be thinking and dreaming of as well. So welcome.
Thanks, Jo. It's really great to be here.
You're well known in the world of business and fashion design as being also very established in the online community and being a leader in that area. This sort of thing doesn't happen overnight, and it's a result of many years of hard work, and there's lots of twists and turns in the road and stops and goes. But I'd love to press rewind to see how you got to this point. So tell me, Nikki, where did you grow up and what were your younger years like when you were a child?
So most of my childhood up until the end of school was spent in regional Queensland in a town called Maryborough, and it was pretty free-range parenting situation. It was the 70s. On a weekend, you just went out on your bike and you came home by sundown. It was, you literally in Maryborough, you could ride everywhere. Like I rode to sport, I rode to my games. My parents really had it easy compared with when it was my turn to do that kind of thing. And it was a really kind of no frills childhood. The only defining point for me was that my mother left when I was 6 and I grew up with my dad and my stepmother. So a very unusual set of circumstances for the 70s, and definitely unusual in a regional town where no one else was kind of in that situation. So always felt a little bit off center and out of the norm. And I think I wanted to be like the conservative other side to my parents' 70s hippie, just, very, very loose parenting situation.
Yeah.
So,
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because again, when you talk about that being in a small town, you are under the microscope, having lived and spent a lot of my years in a small town or a remote area. Everyone knows everything about you. So I can absolutely identify with how you must have been feeling at that point in time when you were much younger.
I think kids just want to feel, they don't want to stand out. And I don't know who tells us that. You want to fit in with the crowd. And especially like we arrived to Maryborough, which was actually the town I was born in and where my dad was born, to start my year 3. My parents were teachers. We'd lived in Gympie and Gundawindi as well before that as teachers, particularly back then, moved around quite a bit. And, you're arriving as a new kid and everyone else has their mum and dad at home and has a really lovely cut lunch and you go, okay, yep. How can I fit in? How can I fit in here? So, And I was good at school, did everything I was supposed to do. I was the easy one. My brothers were the rat bags. And they're very successful now, but they will openly admit to that. And I was the one that my parents didn't have to worry about. In fact, they only worried that I'd studied too much at one point, which was
Is that
hilarious
right?
because I was still working, playing sport, going out with my friends.
Yeah.
Yet they were worried about that. And I'm going, okay. Yeah.
And so you had all of your education in Maryborough? Is that where?
Yes, I finished year 12
Yep.
at the end of 84. And then I came to uni in Brisbane, but at the same time, my dad and stepmom moved to Brisbane I think they were waiting for me to finish school. Maybe they would have gone sooner, but also to get those rat bag boys out of the environment they're in and hopefully find a better environment to land in. But they were also ready to come to live in a city. My stepmother had arrived in Maryborough for 1 year on a teacher exchange from London. So a bit of a culture shock, and they were very keen to move to the city, and they continued their career at city schools and education department.
Well, that's an interesting look at snapshot of younger Nikki as the years of growing up, and that freedom also in a town when you are younger is great, because everyone knows you. There's that element of safety, and particularly back then too, you'd be out much later in the afternoons or on the weekends, but you felt safe. There was that security knowing that you were safe because everyone knew you.
Yes, and truly at that time in that town, in our history, there was one murder in the whole time we were there, and that was quite heavily publicised because it's still something that crops up in the Courier Mail every so often. It was a bank manager and his wife, and it was just very strange, and it's strange it's never been solved. And it was completely unrelated to anything that had happened in the town, and that was the what we grew up with. There was no crime at that point, and that's the era as well as being a small town. But yeah.
I know. Do you talk about that with your own children, how it was so different?
Yeah, I actually did talk about it with my adult daughter the other day, because she's a psychologist, but she's gone back to uni and doing a master's of teaching, and she's looking at doing this year's prac, one of them, or she's doing it remotely and regionally somewhere. And it's a very different story in some regional towns now, that the drug situation has then created the crime situation that comes with it. So very, very, very different.
Yeah. No, it would be very.
And not necessarily, I'm not saying that's Maryborough, but I'm just saying that previously regional towns were a little bit immune from that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I've had that experience of being in the regional towns where you have seen the change over the time, and it's such a different look to a smaller town, particularly those who live on a highway, because there's so much accessibility now for people to get things. And anyway, that's the dark side. We're not talking about the dark side of things today. We're going to talk about the next part of your life, Nikki, was growing up in the 80s. You're an 80s chick like I was, and being a teenager and a young adult in the 80s was a lot of fun. So tell me about your time when you were in the 80s and how you might have enjoyed that.
So I guess a big thing was when I left Maryborough to go to uni, it wasn't like a lot of other kids who left for regional towns and came back, because I didn't have a home to come back to on holidays. So I almost became a new person. And I'd always had Nikki as a nickname. And when I arrived at uni and I stayed on campus for the first year, I just introduced myself as Nikki, and I'd made up the spelling, NIKKI.
Oh, I love it.
And now if anyone calls me Nicole, I'm in trouble, or it is someone who knows me from the school days. And it's quite funny. And that's when I kind of did I come into my own at uni a little bit? It definitely, that first year was a lot of fun living on campus and just embracing all that, but it was not very good academic-wise. My girlfriends, who I'm still friends with today, who came from all over different parts of Queensland, we just got up to a lot of mischief and a lot of fun. And then we all had to pull our socks up for the start of the second year. But I just think that was like a really exciting time to be amongst it. And the hairstyles, I had a perm for my first year of uni, which was not attractive in any way, shape or form. It was the only ever perm I ever had. I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea. Maybe I thought that with Nikki was just going to be my new persona. And and it was just it was an extension of my childhood because you're not that much older. Yes, you're going out and having fun, but I was still playing hockey and I was still working and doing coursework. So it was just a very fun time. And it was 3 years at uni. I studied journalism and ended up winning the journalism prize for my year.
Oh, congratulations.
But guess where I ended up after that? Back in my hometown.
Oh, you did not.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that's
yes,
nice
I
and
did.
safe.
Well, definitely journalism jobs are in a shortage now, but they've always been. Like, I still remember the first lecture that we had in first year where they said, look around you, there are 300 people in the room. There will be 30 left at the end of third year. And I went, and still 30 from one university was too many to everybody to find jobs. So really probably had imposter syndrome, and I just also took that first offer that came. But anyway, again, two of my cohort, we also went to Maryborough, and we had the best time. We had a share house, and it was different coming back to my hometown when you were a young professional and there were new teachers in the town, new people working, nurses and doctors and physios at the hospital. And the only time in my life where you made friends sort of across a wide group of industries, and there were so few places to go out that you met people. And you also had to create your own fun. And we look back on those years as some of the best, and it was a real privilege, and it was so much fun. So I ended up staying there for 2.5 years, and before moving to the Sunshine Coast, to the Sunshine Coast Daily. So it was part of the same newspaper group, but a bigger publication. And I was ready to move on. I was doing a lot of the senior jobs at the paper. And both of those two girls I talked about had moved. So it was time to spread my wings. But I still think if I'd had a little bit more of the confidence I have now back then, it would have been a different pathway. I'm also not a big believer in regrets for things that you might have done, because everything has a place and a reason why you've landed there. And yeah, it was a fun time. And also when you try and explain that to adult children, they've got everything on tap here in the city.
Yes.
They can go to a gig, they can go out for drinks, they can go and do the walks and the picnics and stuff like that. But we literally had to create all that for ourselves.
That was so much fun. And in your role too, you would have experienced more in a smaller town. I'm just thinking, from my teaching background, you get to do and taste more things in a smaller setting simply because there aren't the people on the ground to do the other jobs. So your experience when you went on to that next place would have given you a leg up compared to other people who may have gone, who went there straight away having graduated.
I'd literally done every job. And so, which is quite scary in some of the jobs I was doing at a very young age. And I'm still friends on Facebook with the editor, and the night that I sent out a massive headline without the right spelling in it, just like for the front page. And I was like, oh, she's never let me let that down at all.
But I bet you always checked again.
Fair call. And like, I wasn't the only eyes to see it, but I was in charge of it. So yes, like everyone's human, and that kind of stuff happens. But it was definitely a great ground for the next step. And even at the Sunshine Coast Daily at the time, it was a bigger publication, but you still did and had exposure to a large variety of roles over that time. So everything that I learned in that 20 years definitely has played a part, not the technology side of things, but the adaptability has played a part in what I've done since leaving journalism.
That's right. Nothing's wasted, is it? When you think about the skills that you've learned during that time, you're able to use them in a completely different way, but you're still utilizing them. And when you were speaking earlier about, do you have regrets? I'm the same, because it wouldn't have led you to where you are right now. You would be somewhere completely different. So yeah, it's playing the what if game really is not very helpful at all, because if you're happy where you are now, then
yes,
whatever has happened
that's
previously.
all you can. And that's all I believe you can be in control of. Your own happiness is about right now. It's not about what you might have been at school or in a particular job or as a parent. It is actually today.
Yes.
It's this week, it's this month. And the only person who can manage that is you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And did you have big dreams and ambitions back then, or were you happy with what you were doing at that point in time?
Do you know, it's funny. I was always going to be a TV journalist. And then I told myself, no, I don't want to do that, because I want to, it's more about the writing and the story. But I've been reflecting on that recently. And I do believe what held me back was that I never thought I was the right size to be a TV journalist. And particularly back there in the 80s and 90s, and I would say today as well, there is that very image-driven look. And I feel like I just told myself, no, that's not going to be for you, and left it at that and didn't pursue it after I got my first job.
Yeah, that's sad, isn't it? The stories that you tell yourself. And well, they're the stories that can sometimes still pop up now.
Yes, but they were reinforced by the industry itself. So I think we see a lot more diversity in size and age and authenticity in our media these days, but it was very much Modelist kind of women, young women.
Yes.
That's what you would see. Men have always got away with however they look and how old they are and that sort of thing. But for women, it was a particular look, and that was it. So I definitely got that message loud and clear, and didn't have anywhere near the confidence I have now to kind of fight that.
Yeah. When you speak about that, because you do forget, and when I'm casting my mind back to that period of time, I'm thinking the weather girl and what a coveted role the weather girl was. And it's that sort of whole, you have to look a certain way, be a certain age in order to fulfill a job properly in the eyes of what it was like back then. Yeah, no, I have forgotten. Female. If you're a female, yes, with the disclaimer, if you're a female, exactly. Now, how old were you when you decided that you were wanting to settle down and have children and to marry? And did those new roles come easily to you at that point in time?
I was too young. That's what I know. So I've been married twice. I'm with my second husband. And first time around, I really thought by the age of 25, I remember my early 20s, that I should be married. And you know what? I was married. I was 25 when I got married. Right. Friends around me were getting married. And I really should have taken things a lot slower. Again, I can't have regrets because I have two wonderful children from that marriage, but it all was rushed very quickly. Like, we were married within a year of starting to date. Young people of today never do that. Never. It's not a good idea. And you know what? They wouldn't do that. It'd be very rare that would happen today. And I didn't know who I was. I thought I was old. No idea who I was. So my eldest two are past the age that I was when I was married, and I'm very okay with that for their life choices. And it's not to say that if it had turned out, I wouldn't have supported them, but I just think in your 20s, you really are still working out who you are. And as soon as you commit on a marriage scale without really knowing who you are, let alone the other person, then it's not necessarily going to be a successful union. And it wasn't for me.
Yeah. It's a time of huge growth, isn't it? Your 20s. So who you are at 25 will
Yeah.
be different to who you are in your late 20s. And then you've got the 30s. And your children, were they born fairly soon after you got
Oh,
married?
yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what I thought you did.
Yes.
So I'd had both of them by the time I was 30.
Yeah.
And all in that time as well, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. When I got married, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. Why I was making big life decisions
Because
when
that's
I
what
was
you
not
do.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
is a little bit crazy. And
Mm.
again, I think I just wanted to be like everyone else. And I feel like you do, when you're younger, just think of the wedding day and the fairy tale nature of it and that kind of thing. You have no concept of what it actually means long term to be in a partnership like that.
Yes.
Most people haven't been in a long-term partnership by the time they're 25. It's rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was, again, no regrets, but obviously I didn't go into a marriage wanting to end it. No one does that, I don't think. And that was a pretty tough time. And at 28, when my eldest was 5 months old, my mum and my stepdad drowned in a very tragic accident in New Zealand. And grief is a funny thing. I buried it. I had a small child. That was easy to do, but then I also buried it by having another one quickly. And the benefit of hindsight and work with a psychologist helps me to see why I did that. I also had a miscarriage at the same time that my mum and stepdad died. And so I'd had no experience with grief. No one close to me had died before. And I went, I'll just have another baby. That'll keep me occupied. And it did. And that's the problem. It kept me super occupied because two kids 17 months apart keep you very occupied. And I was still working part-time. There was no paid maternity leave. So I think I had a little bit of time off, but then I would work weekends. And so it was just a bit of a crazy, you certainly don't have any time for yourself, but you don't have any time for your partner, and you are just in kid zone.
Yes.
And then I think once I got to school and I had a little bit of breathing space, I looked around and went, there's no connection here. There's actually no connection. And yes, I would have contributed to that, but also it takes two to keep the connection together. And it just, I could not be that person. How old was I? I was 34. I went, is this it? Like, is this it? Should I be allowed to be happy? I don't know.
Yeah.
The kids obviously made me happy, and I loved that aspect of it. And I just had a very different view of how a relationship and a long-term partnership should do. And it's two people actually wanting to spend time together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a lot to process in a very short amount of time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is probably why it's hard to believe I'm 56, because I think I only started life at 34.
Oh, wow.
And not long after, I met my now husband, who is 11 years younger than me. We've been together 20 years. We've been married almost 19. And actually, we've been together 21 years. See? Menopause brain. We've been married almost 19 years. So we've defied the odds there. And it is a very different scenario, and it's a partnership. And I think definitely going in to first marriage, you're not going to go into a second one without some self-reflection and some idea about what you want a long-term partnership to look like. And it's obviously not perfect. No one's if anyone's telling you that their long-term relationship is perfect, there are highs and lows. There's been tragedy. There's always stuff going on. My husband lost his mum when she was 54 to ovarian cancer. That was fairly early on in our relationship. And I definitely know, and I'm definitely conscious of putting in the work. Like, you can't just get married and that's it. Like, you have to put work into your relationship. Like, you have to put work into your friendships. You get back what you put in. And that's the biggest lesson I took from marriage 1 to marriage 2. And, we're still okay. Life's not all a bed of roses, but he's still my person, and it's a good working partnership, and he's very happy. We had a child together as well.
Oh, lovely.
He is about to finish school this year, so life is going to change again for us.
Yes.
And I'm very conscious of that, and you can see how when couples get to that last step of that in the trenches kind of parenting, you go and you look around and you go, you don't know that person. And I'm really proud of both of us that we do know who we are, and we've got common goals for the future. But that, again, if you don't work on that, and if you don't talk about that,
that's right,
then I can see you get to that next stage. A lot of couples do split at that point too.
Well, that's right. It's growing as an individual as you age, but also growing together as a couple and finding what things that you've still got in common and working on those things. Yeah, it makes that really is a special key. And it's also that special key for you both to be able to have your own set of interests as well and be your own person. You can see how couples do stay together for a certain amount of time to make sure it's stable for the children and so forth. And then for some people, they grow together even stronger. And thankfully, that's been my experience. Others will go, we really don't have much in common anymore, apart from perhaps the children. And so they go their separate ways. It's an interesting
I don't think enough people really talk about that until it's in that kind of danger zone. And yes, you've got to have your own interests, but you've also got to champion the interests of your partner. Support them.
Yes.
It support their growth and change, and not think that you're going to be the same people that you were when you first started dating. So there's a lot there, and I didn't choose to have the perspective that I ended up having, but it's definitely been invaluable to me in this marriage.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Nikki, thinking about as you're getting older, and we sort of had a little bit of a chat prior to recording, 40s and 50s are a huge time of a change for a woman. So we think about our work. For many women, it might be work, family, body changes, how you view the world, because now you've got the world experience behind you. What are some of the big things that you've noticed for yourself going through this phase, being a woman in her mid-50s now?
In my particular circumstance, being in a relationship where I felt I could be myself was the catalyst for having the courage to leave my former career. That way, while it may not have been a high-paying career, it was stable-ish. This is just at the start of the squeeze on mainstream media. So it was stable-ish, but I was someone who just didn't have the confidence to take those risks. So I jumped out to start Styling You when I was 41. So it's a very unusual time to really pivot. I think we'll see lots more of it in future generations, because they won't stick with something if they're not enjoying it. They'll move on, which I full credit to them, because you've got many stages of life ahead of you. And I think because I was valued for who I was and I had the confidence, I made these decisions with the backing of my husband, but not just the backing any financially, it was backing of just confidence. And I've got your back, and if you want to try this, then I'm going to support you. And I don't think I'd ever felt that before from anybody in my life, going back to childhood and anything like that. So that, I think, allowed me to be the person that I think was always kind of hiding a way in there. And at the same time, it coincided with the arrival of the online world. And originally it was just blogs and a tiny bit of Facebook, and then Twitter happened. And back then it was a very nice place to hang out. I don't go there at all now. It's a very scary place to hang out. And then Instagram, and it just felt like a really great time to be at the forefront of all of that online movement and shifting I was in the business of sharing information, but previously I'd been broadcasting information, and around fashion and beauty was the sort of the latter years in editing a magazine. But now suddenly there were all these platforms where you could start a conversation with people, and that just lit something up inside of me.
Yep.
And definitely what the business was in 2008, 15 years ago, is very different from what it is now. But all the adaptability I learned when I was a journalist and every technology change that happened set me up to just keep half an eye out here. What's this doing here? Do I need to jump on that platform? That is something that set me up for it. And I think the dynamic nature of working in the online space is something that definitely lights me up. I think I like that challenge. I like that nothing stays the same. Superficially, nothing stays the same. A lot stays the same because essentially you're talking to a community. It's just how you connect with that community has changed so much over the years. So I feel like in my 40s, I really got this gift and was able to lay the groundwork for how my business has evolved into my 50s. And with that has come a time of your life where you actually have more confidence, or you care less about what other people think than you did in your 30s and 20s. So it's that combination of the two things that helps me to just feel so excited about what my life is right now. And it's something that I'm creating and I'm in control of.
No, it is an exciting time because, and again, you're not wanting to slow down now because there's still so much that you can do and there's still so much out there that you want to be a part of. So it's fabulous. I think that in many ways, women of our age are starting to walk into new territory, and that makes it much easier for the women who are younger as well to see that, life doesn't end at 50. Life can keep going at 60, 70, whatever it might be. Sky's really the limit. And that is really exciting to be a part of that.
It so is. And if you feel vibrant in your life, and some days you don't feel very vibrant.
I know.
But if you're creating a life with a structure that feels vibrant, then your brain keeps working. You are still making new connections. You are just being open to learning new things. Then isn't it a better way to look at the second half of our life than think it's all about slowing down to nothing?
For sure. Yep. And that's the message I absolutely love about connecting with women like yourself and women I interview on here, is that others can then see that there is more possibility. You don't have to hear that old narrative. You create your own narrative, and seeing others who do it gives you that little bit of confidence to maybe just take that first tentative step into the unknown.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Nikki, you talked about your blogs and getting into the early stages of some of the social media. Is that what got you into, in 2019, your branching out into Styling You, your fashion label? Or is there a little bit more of that story that you'd like to share?
There's definitely, that was another endpoint and pivot. But on the whole, when I started sharing, it was just based on my love and obsession. Always had an obsession with clothes and makeup and anything like that, much to the horror of my very feminist 1970s mother. I do love the superficial stuff because for me, it gives me the outward confidence gives me the inward confidence, and whatever.
Yes.
Each to their own. I also don't judge people if they're not into that. That's fine. But what was always awry with my love of fashion is that for most of my life, fashion did not talk to me. The fashion industry, again, a bit like I talked about the TV journalism, the fashion industry was aimed at a certain type of woman. Well, they made out that. And even like I talked to younger women, I said most labels when I was in my teens and early 20s went to size 12. 12.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ridiculous. So I was sized out of a lot of stuff from an early age, but I still loved fashion. So it was like this dysfunctional relationship that you just kept coming back for more. I actually made my own clothes when I was at uni, and maybe that was a great budgetary workaround, plus also a sizing workaround. It was also a thing in the 80s. Everyone had a sewing machine, and you'd go off. I'd go to Gardens in Brisbane and buy some new fabric and a pattern and just whip it up, and no one look at the finer details, but it was fun to do. So there was that context. So when I started sharing online and realizing that there were other people sharing online, whether it was in Australia, definitely there was quite a few US bloggers who I still follow today who were kind of ahead of the game at that time. I wouldn't say that they're ahead now. I think it's quite equal all around the world. But I've gone, okay, so they don't look like a model, but they're still showing how they're wearing the clothes. I need to put myself more into this content. And that's what I started doing. So the everyday style movement is something I started in 2013. And it was literally about sharing what I was wearing every day. And then a lot of other followers got on board and have built their own Instagram communities from that 10 years ago. Oh. But even before that, I was seeing a lot of the start of my business also involved working one-on-one with personal styling clients, something I evolved out of because the blog was making more money in sponsorship and my time was better spent that way. Mm. But in that time, I saw 150 women, and it didn't matter what size they were. They couldn't imagine themselves in the campaign image in a store, say, of a garment on there. I had this ability to kind of, in my own head, work out that, oh yeah, that shape's probably going to be fine for me. Mm. They couldn't get past that visual. So the Model and Me posts that still exist on the blog, and I put them on Instagram from time to time, reflect a time where literally there were no other sized models shown on what little social media there was back then, but also in magazines, in big billboards, in shops. There was just one size, which represents such a small percentage of the population. So I started these Model and Me posts with a brand at the time that people were convinced was only for skinny people. So I showed a photo of the model and a photo of me in it, and it kind of grew from there. And it's hard to believe today because I'm not going to say most websites. There are a lot of websites, shopping websites you go on, and you will see more than one model represented, which is great. It's a big step forward in the last decade, but there is still so far to go because there's still a lot of brands that stop at 14, 12 or 14. Brands that literally do not want you wearing their clothes. This is the whole thing of it. They don't want you in your clothes. They don't want you down the street and someone asking where you got it from because it's not their brand. It still makes my blood boil. It's like, well, who are you to say that? Like, if I've got the money to spend on something, who are you to tell me that I shouldn't be wearing your brand? And particularly bigger brands, startups, it's a whole different thing. And I know that with our label, it can come down to money. And I'll get to that in a minute. But with these bigger brands who just refuse to go above a 14 in this day and age, it's ridiculous, let alone repost images of women who are bigger, of color, of ability in their grid, because lo and behold, that won't suit their branding. So I was starting to offer an alternative. And then the everyday style community came on the top of that, where we celebrated by people sharing their own everyday style with the same hashtag. The hashtag has taken on a beast of its own now, so I can't take credit for the millions that are now using that hashtag. But originally it was this wonderful, beautiful community of mostly Australian women who I'm still friends with today, and I still follow today, and they're all ages, shapes, sizes, different styles. Like, that's the other thing that I think it's so wonderful to celebrate something that looks fantastic on someone else, even though it's nothing that you would necessarily wear. But you can appreciate that that person has chosen that because it suits their style, personality, and because they chose it to wear, and it makes them feel good. So those couple of things were definitely hugely just, I wanted to shake up the industry that I loved so much. So the next step was actually an online store selling other people's labels. And then in 2019, or 2018, I decided to put into play doing my own label. And when I was thinking about that, yes, all the clothes and everything, I've gone, you know what? I want to be the first label to photograph everything on every size that we stock. I want to make women feel seen. I want them to come to our site and be able to go, oh, that looks like me.
Yep.
Check the model's measurements. Oh my goodness, it's so close to mine. I know what to buy. So you've got shopping confidence, plus also just acceptance. We want you in our community. We want you wearing our brand. We want you to feel fabulous in our brand. And it baffles me why brands just don't want that. Like, isn't it about selling the clothes? Isn't it about making women feel good? No, it's not. It's entrenched so ridiculously in an outdated idea that that fashion is only about one particular person. It should be only seen on one particular person. You know, the old adage of designers only wanting to put it on one type of person because they're basically coat hangers and they look better than other women. I challenge you, why don't you make clothes that look good on people who aren't coat hangers, which is what we set out to do as well.
Yeah. Yep. So the whole idea of the diversity of people of different ages, different shapes, different heights, abilities, color, that's right. And then you're looking at your site and what you post on Instagram is, you know, that for me is huge, because I embrace diversity as much as what you are doing with your label. And I'm so bloody happy that somebody has taken that stance, and you were the first to be able to do that. So that must make you feel very proud, you and your team that you work with. That must make you incredibly proud to be that leader.
Yeah, I'm very proud. And it's my why. It's the why I would do it. Because honestly, why would you start a fashion label? It's hard work. It's unpredictable, particularly the last few years.
Yes.
And it's a lot of money on the line each season. So, and no one in the industry can go, yes, we're going to need X number of units of this, and that's what we're going to need to sell through, but not sell out too quickly, but not be left with items that we haven't been able to sell. So no one can predict that successfully. And it's tough on a day-to-day. And like, I'm not trained in this. Yeah. So if I didn't have my why, which is to continue to shake up the way fashion is marketed, then I don't know if I would have continued through COVID for sure. Like it's the fear factor is there constantly when you, like any small business is there. But product-based business taken on a next level, because you have to order the product so far in advance. Yeah. And apart from the guessing about what people might actually find popular, there's the guessing of the economy at the time of selling and those sort of things. So it's not something that anyone should jump into lightly. But the greater force at play for me is my die on the hill message that fashion should be for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And to let people know, no matter what they feel on the inside, you can look great. And to be able to see yourself.
Great.
Yeah, that's it. So to be able to see yourself that, oh, I can wear that, because you can't, one of my favorite sayings is you can't be what you can't see. And so for women to be able to see themselves in somebody else, that's huge. Yeah. So congratulations on that. And you wear a lot of your pieces too, Nikki, they are classics, so they can be worn season after season. The fabrics, they're beautiful fabrics as well. So that's different. You're not into fast fashion. So you're not chasing.
No.
Yeah. And that's another big difference.
So we're made in Australia, and instead of just starting another fashion brand that goes into the same cycle, that fast fashion cycle of very trend driven, I wanted to, and something I've always talked about in my blog posts, in my book, is having the basics covered off before you go out and buy the colorful prints and sparkly things, because it's something that I could never work out why I had nothing to wear. I've basically done my own self-help through this 15 years. It was because like I never had a pair of jeans that was properly fitted for me. So all those beautiful tops that would always seduce me at the shops had nothing to go with. So that premise I have carried on through to this label. And I really still believe that if you have quality basics as the foundation of your wardrobe, you will always have something to wear. You will get up, and even if you haven't put much thought into what you're wearing for the day, that you have those pieces to fall back on and rely on. And for a lot of the women I've talked with and worked with over the years in the community, it is that they get stuck and they get stressed about it. So there's that premise. And then we wanted everything to feel comfortable on, to not be digging in as I'm sitting here at my desk, to not feel scratchy on the skin. All of those basic things that you get to a point in your life and you're going, I'm not putting up with that.
Yeah.
I'm not putting up with how that feels. And I remember a few years ago, a dress that I got sent by a label to promote, and I put it on. Oh my God, it was so scratchy on my skin. And it was summer and it was hot, and I would have been perimenopausal at the time. I'm going, just rip this dress off. It was terrible. It was terrible. So everything has to have a beautiful feel to it. It has to feel good on. These are things that when you take out the rubbish that is in the fashion industry and this need to keep turning over new things all the time and following trends, that a lot of labels lose sight of. Like, will women actually feel comfortable in it? Because when you feel comfortable, then the confidence happens.
Yep.
And it's got a number of factors. It's the cut, it's the fabric, it's the way it's designed. We're cut for curves. We build those curves into our designs. We don't just make something bigger. Yeah. We make something bigger in the places that needs to be bigger. Well, so they're all key things that I'm trying to change and offer as our small business offering to people who are fed up with trying to find pieces that feel good and they want to invest and not have to replace everything wholesale a year.
So very important. And all of those links to Nikki's clothing label and Instagram account and all the socials, I'll be adding into the show notes as well. But Nikki, very quickly, do you want to tell them that in case people don't go, where they can find your beautiful clothes as well?
So at Styling You, the label is the Instagram account, and stylingyoushop.com.au. But if you search Styling You on Google, you'll find everything there, including my old beast of a blog, which I feed occasionally with new content. It's mostly on the socials these days, but sometimes there's things that can't be explained in an Instagram caption and they get a lovely long blog post attached to them.
I don't know the story. Can I ask you a question about the naming of your pieces? Because that's what I find fascinating. You'll talk about certain, is that the Nikki top you're wearing now? No, is it?
It is, but it's not after me. This is Nikky.
Okay.
It's a black and white shirt, and it's actually named after my brother's girlfriend. Everything is named after a person, whether it's a customer, a friend, or a friend of the label, models that we've worked with. I get frustrated because I've got to come up with new names all the time. But our customers obviously provide a lot of names. But for me, I just want to be able to say, yes, that is named after this person. Lovely. And I keep a record of that. And then you can't cycle back, except you can after a few years. Your name is Jo. We actually have a Joanne. Do I have a Jo coming?
I was only a Joanne when I was in trouble, a bit like when you and Nicole, when you were
like
in trouble.
Nicole. Yeah. But yes, so a lot of our customers in the era comes up. We've had lots of, for a while there, in one season, we had Joanne, Jane, Jenny, all in one season. And I'm going, okay, this is telling, isn't it? We're all but yes, and I've had this isn't me, but I've had a Nikki piece, I think one of the original pieces that we did. I think I've had a Nicole, but that was named after someone else.
Yeah.
So you can do the variations, but it's all to do with the barcoding and stuff like that at the production end that has to be different. But I just like that because that is just underpinning. This is a community for women of all ages, shapes, sizes, well, up to our size 20, which is like a size 22. Yeah. And we want you to feel welcome. And obviously we're not for everyone because we're not a budget label, but that's on purpose as well. We really want to work with our Australian manufacturers, and we're not about having to replace these items in a hurry.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a big difference, because when you think how much money you would spend on fast fashion rather than just putting a bit of money into a couple of great pieces each season.
Yeah. And I get it, because, you know, everyone has a different budget. But I would say we're mostly around the Witchery Country Road
Yes.
price range, with a couple of pieces that might be more expensive, but they're usually a very limited run on those. So it's not for everybody, but it's ethically sits where I want it to be. And I try to do that guessing game that we're not left with excess stock at the end of the season. But if we are, I work in with an organisation in Brisbane called Styling Station, and I donate the clothes to them because they only take new tagged stock, and they both not sell them, but people can buy styling sessions in store. So they raise money to keep the business running, but they also work with agencies to dress people. So in the past year, particularly a year ago, they were helping Ukrainian refugees who are arriving in Brisbane, as well as flood affected women from northern New South Wales and Brisbane. So they're tapped into those agencies. Those people get clothes that when they've got nothing. And so for me, that's a very important part of the whole picture, because I have waste and I don't want it to be in landfill, and I don't want to completely devalue the brand. I would rather it be repurposed in a place that has more meaning to other people, particularly women.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. What are your dreams for the business?
Do you know what? I knew you were going to ask me that question. Can I just say, I feel like for the last 3 years, and I don't think this year is going to be even better, it literally is staying afloat. And I'm going to be honest, if you're talking to anyone else in a product-based business and service, if you've got shop fronts or anything like that, it's really hard to have those big picture dreams that you in 2019 you might have had, because we've all been shook and scared. And for me, if I can operate at a profit, I run a very streamlined business in terms of staff. I have 2 part-time remote working staff. I used to have a showroom and I used to have more staff, and I've just brought that back down because I realized this is how I like to be. But I have a wonderful warehouse logistics company that does everything, and obviously my manufacturers in Sydney, so they're like contractors, and it's simplified for me. I realized at this stage of my life that I needed it to be simplified, and I don't need to be a massive business. Scaling down the new scaling up. And that's something that I heard another business talk about year before last, even, I think it was, in 2021. And it stuck with me because I went, why am I trying to massively grow this? Like, what's the end game here? And I realized it was just going to be more stress. So if I can have a profitable business and still manage to get my message across all the time and enjoy what I'm doing, then that is a great point for me. So beyond that, I'd love to be sitting here 1 year and going, oh, it's a great year. You know, economy's just going great. I can think about the future, but literally, I'm going to be honest, it's just staying in business.
No, but I love that. I love the way that you're thinking about those sort of things, because it is creating your life by design. And if you knew that that's not the way that you were wanting to go, then to change it, because you've got that ability. So no, well done. And I think you've got so many people who love the clothes that you design, that you make, and they love everything about what you say. Then you'll be riding those waves, and you will be here again. Year after year, Nikki, year after year. So with so much life left ahead of us, what are you looking forward to in the future?
I'm looking forward to working smarter, even smarter than I am right now. But just once we don't have a school-age child, traveling outside of school holidays.
Yes.
That excites me. That excites me. To not only is it cheaper, but also you can avoid crowds. So if you want to do a Northern Europe trip. So
Beautiful.
it's things like that, like still working, but opening up more travel again in a way that's a little bit more flexible than it will have been for the last nearly 28 years.
Have you got role models that you look at, like current role models?
Most of my role models are other women in business, probably similar size business or slightly bigger, because they're the ones who I'm friends with, who honestly share that when it's tough. I love celebrating what they do. And it's just from the moment I started my own business, it is other women's in business. It's not lofty, well-known international people. It is literally just other women at, whether it's Sally who does my facials, whether it is Georgie who does my lashes and brows, whether it's where I buy flowers from. It is those women who I'm supporting on a regular basis, who feel they can share with me how they're going, and I can be honest with them for myself. And that they are the people who give me the most inspiration, because they're at the forefront and they're doing it. Like they're just giving it a crack. They're also generally they're helping women as well. And that's kind of part of who I am. And I love championing other women in business, but also connecting women with other people who they might not have been connected with, to help them in their business journey, because mostly a lot of those women are also working like me by themselves, and you're not in a big office with lots of people to throw ideas around with. So when you can trust women in similar situations to you, it is a great thing to then be able to open up to them, likewise be a support.
Totally agree. And when things are unknown, it is for myself, this is something I left a teaching career only a couple of years ago to go into something completely different. And it can be very daunting, it can be very scary, but to have the support of other women around you who are in a similar position is absolutely invaluable. But that goes in all areas of your life as well, doesn't it? Not only in other aspects. Just the support of women can take you to an entirely different place. And it's very important to be able to recognize that and to be thankful for that too, and to be appreciative.
And the other big thing that I always have thought is important since day one of running my own business is share your knowledge. Don't hold on to it like a vault. Like you are not going to lose anything from sharing what you know. In fact, it comes back to me tenfold all the time, because you're helping someone out. They're probably not in competition with you anyway. And even if they are, I walk every week with a fellow designer in Brisbane. Like, it's not a competition. There's enough for everybody. And if you're sticking to your own true brand and what you're doing, then you can have amazing conversations with peers without that, oh my goodness, if I tell her that, she might steal that or whatever. Like, it's just rubbish. Like, leave that in the playground from your school years. There is so much to be gained by sharing your things that you've learnt with other women particularly, and that creates a culture of sharing in general. And it just, you let go of that. There's so much more to be learnt from your peers than finding out information and holding on to it tightly because you think that someone else should find it themselves as well. Make it easy for people, and they'll make it easy for you in another way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nikki, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. We've covered a lot of country, and I thank you very much for being so open and vulnerable with different aspects of your life, and just your knowledge and what you're doing to support other women and how they show up in the world. That is incredibly important. So thank you for all that you do and for being here today. And just to wrap up, I have a closing question that I love to ask all of my guests, and that is, if you could look into the future, what do you hope that 80-year-old Nikki will say about current day Nikki?
I hope 80-year-old Nikki is sitting on the deck, sipping on a G&T and congratulating her much younger self for having the courage to stand up for what she believed in, and for realizing that it's never too late to do that.
Brilliant. Cheers to that, Nikki.
Cheers.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to this episode. There is absolutely no doubt that when you surround yourself with other high vibe women who are going through a similar stage of life, the way you view your world changes. It's so easy to get caught up in a negative mindset and a downward spiral, because so often we see and hear the doom and gloom about aging for a woman. And yep, this stage of life is not always a bed of roses. There are difficult times, but each stage of life comes with its own challenges and ups and downs. You don't have to settle for a life that doesn't light you up. You can create a life that you're in love with, and it's never too late. So much can change in a year, because I've actually been there and I've experienced that myself. Supporting and mentoring women who are ready for a fresh start in the middle of life is one of my biggest joys. I know the possibilities for you are endless. You just need someone to help you get clarity to see what's possible and show you the steps to design your new future. I'm creating a new 4-week group mentoring program for women who are ready to take that next step. And the energy and the conversations and the support are going to be next level. What I can share now is that it will start on the 20th of April, and I'll give you more details over the next couple of weeks. But if you're ready for this and you want to learn more now, send me a DM on socials, email, or head to joeclarkcoaching.com. I can't wait for you to join and see what's possible. Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.